It has taken me about 2 years, but Joe Connolly from News Radio 880 is on, working for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for bringing your distinctive voice. This is going to be awesome. So I want to just read a few things for the folks that just listen to your voice but don't know so much about your background. Former WCBS News anchor, former sports reporter, former press secretary to Senator Christopher Dodd, former management experience at news radio stations. New York Magazine says you dramatize rather than crunch numbers, creating instructive vignettes. And that's what we all love about you. I will call them business pearls.
Thank you.
So let's walk down memory lane a little bit. How did you get into this business, Joe? So let's listen to the voice.
Into the radio business or the
Let's start from the beginning.
News reporting. When I was a kid, I
love this. When I was a kid.
That I vaguely remember having radio stations in my home as a little boy. And at this time, Eisenhower was president. It was the late 50s. And he used to have heart attacks. So a news bulletin would come on this little early black and white television. And my parents would say, shh, 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 this is a news bulletin. President Eisenhower had a heart attack. So I started setting up radio stations, and I would play records, and I'd lift the needle off the record and say, this is a bulletin, this is a bulletin. President Eisenhower,
How old were you?
6, 7, 8 years old.
Wow.
And I think I must have wanted to get the attention that the television was causing in the household. So it's in my blood. I just always wanted to be on the radio.
Okay, so that's 6 years old. Then when did you first do your first broadcast?
I was a junior year in high school, and
I knew you were one of those.
I was one of that small group.
Yeah.
Right. So before I went to college, I worked at WMRC Radio in Milford, Massachusetts. And my first broadcast was to run the board on the 4th of July in the American Legion game at Pheno Field because nobody wanted to work. And a lot of us in broadcasting have our anniversary dates on the air, 4th of July or Christmas, because nobody wanted to work. So they let the kiddos hanging around the station work. And I knew I had hit the big time because WMRC was upstairs on the second floor in downtown Milford over a furniture store. And just like the Today Show used to have all these clocks on the wall, it said, you know, New York, London, Hong Kong, Paris. Well, I just made a mistake with it too, in different time zones. At any rate, they had these clocks in Milford, and it said New York, London, Paris, Milford. This is how local radio was at that time. And the clocks had not been reset in so long that they were all about 3 minutes off from one another. That was local radio at the time.
I miss local radio.
Well,
there's not a lot of it around these days.
No, but every time I think it's gone, I drove up to the Berkshires the other day and I was listening to WTIC and there was news on there and there was local talk. Every time I think it's gone, I discover that it's not. For instance, the Reeds out in eastern Connecticut, they have run some very good stations, Jim Reed and his dad. They've run some excellent stations out there for a long time. Hopefully the internet is giving them more new voices. And I hope that our radio and television industry has bottomed out in terms of economics because there's more interest in news than ever before.
And why is that, do you think? Because of the world in which we live?
Because the world in which we live, and it's interesting. The more interesting reporters are the ones who are still working, the more experienced people. The young people who come up at CBS absolutely remind me of myself when I was 22, 23, 24. And so there's more interest in news because there's more of it there. Now, some of it's been fragmented, but someone told me the other day, the top 8 business websites, not counting the business page of some newspapers, get more than 100 million unique visitors a month. So
you're in a good field.
Well, that's what I discovered when I started to cover business news. As a reporter, you're always trying to find something relevant in what you're covering to the audience. Whether you're covering a 2-alarm fire in a vacant warehouse, you're trying to look for some angle or some element to make this fire interesting to people. So when I started to cover business news, I said, oh man, this is great.
When did that happen?
I'm talking about money.
Well,
So,
of course.
I mean, you don't have to fight for interest. You're talking about money.
When did
And
that
it
happen?
happened
When did you do your first business report?
almost 20 years ago, and I got the job of being the business reporter the old-fashioned way. The guy who did it called in sick.
How many times have we heard that?
And I was standing in front of the program director's door, Bernie Gershon at ABC. And he said, Joe, he said, could you do the business news tomorrow? I said, I guess. Is there a machine or something where it comes in? So I did the business news the next day. At the end of the shift, the boss called me in, and he said, that's exactly what I wanted. And it was because I talked about the price of shoes and appliance sales and what was the best-selling movie. It was all business news that was of interest to me. And this was the end of the days before CNBC, where a lot of the business reporters were trying to impress everybody that they knew as much as everyone on Wall Street. So it went over everybody's head. So I just went in and did a business report that was of interest to me, a homeowner with a mortgage, and they said, that's what we want.
But that's the answer, especially now. For people, when you do the small business report on News Radio 880, you can break through to the normal everyday guy. And that's what makes sense. You know, you can listen to these business folks all day long, but you bring it home. How do you continue to do that? You have a way of writing and a very distinctive voice right now. And I'll go back to this. I call them business pearls. When you're on, I turn on the radio and I listen and I take tidbits from what you're saying and I can apply them.
That's nice.
How is it that this worked for you?
Well, I think of somebody driving in a car, which is still, I think, where most people listen.
Yep, that's me.
So I envision somebody driving in a car. So I have a clear vision of the person who's listening. But one of the best things that I did for my career was to get out of it for a couple of years and go do something else in my 20s when I was a press secretary in Congress. And when I came back, that was when my career started to take off, because I now knew that the world was not waiting for my next newscast. I had gone and done something else. So it gave me a perspective in a career that I already had a decent start in. It was like taking a sabbatical. And when I came back, started to do the news on a radio station in Washington, blah, 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 blah. And it just occurred to me someday that this would be more interesting if I didn't use any stories that I might not conceivably mention myself to somebody over dinner. And the reason that it comes through on the radio sometimes is because I think it's dishonest for a radio news reporter to ask somebody for 30 seconds of their precious attention on something that the reporter doesn't find interesting.
Interesting.
Because you can't ask people to pay attention to something you're not interested in.
Well, you bring it down to an everyday level. Many people cannot do that. They try to do that. When you speak and talk on the radio, it's as if you are talking to me.
Thank you. That's because I won't read anything I don't understand, so I can talk to you. So I have to research this stuff to understand it. If only I can eliminate that part of the job, I'll be on easy street.
How hard is it for you to boil this stuff down? I mean, how fast are you at the copy?
At the real fast at the end. But I'm blessed that I really enjoy doing this, so I continue to do it different ways. The way I'm doing it now is that I'll read news for a couple of hours in the evening, 2 or 3 hours, then I'll sleep on it, and subconsciously, when I wake up the next morning and go to the studio, it just comes out the fingers.
Well, no, that doesn't happen for most people. But you're thinking constantly.
Yeah, and I still get frustrated. I'll tell you a few writer's tips. One of the best ways to write good copy is to make believe it's an email to a friend, because sometimes I'll write a story all day and I'll be emailing a friend later, and they'll say, what were you talking about today? I'll email it, and I'll say, oh man, I wish I wrote it that way on the air. I always find a way to write it better afterwards. Another good one is to just ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? And another good one is to just imagine that you're blurting out this story to somebody. What would you say? And another good one is to just get up and walk around for 2 minutes. And it's amazing how just walking out onto the street will make the story fall into mind for you. One time when I used to work in Times Square, and we all still used to smoke outside the newsroom in those days. We'd go down on the sidewalk, and I would stand there on 40th Street, and I'd see people walking past. You know, typical New York street scene. Some look happy, some look sad, some look busy. And I would stand there with my friends from the RKO Radio Network, and I would think to myself, of the 15 stories that I have that I'm working with on the desk upstairs, of the 15 stories that I'm working with, which one would that man care about?
Interesting, I'll say that again.
Say, car prices. Or which, you know, it's almost, doesn't Letterman or someone do a Zoom, or Leno or somebody? So I kind of do that with the people on the sidewalk.
Now, see, most folks work on such a big deadline that they can't do what you're doing. I'm gonna think on it. I'm gonna do whatever. I think they just, you know, you're on deadline. You've got to blurt it out and you do the best you can.
Right.
When you can, and do you think people care about good writing these days?
Oh, they don't notice. All they know, I mean,
we're
in
not
print
cursive.
they do when you read it.
Right. But you know what, Joe? I see misspellings in the New York Times all of the time. Where's spell check? How is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see that many misspellings in the Times. You're probably a better speller than I am. But of course, in radio, we have a big advantage in that we most of us, well, the anchors on CBS don't always, but people who have a beat like me write our own copy. So
it's best. It's best. Someone said to me, you need to talk to people like you would talk to your neighbor over a fence, just conversationally.
Right.
I think people get too hung up on words, and then it doesn't come off like it's conversational.
Right. The harder you work at broadcasting, ironically, the more natural you become, because you go through all this period of years of trying to do it right, and then you just start doing it, and all of a sudden it works, you know, but it wasn't that easy when we started, was it? And, you know, and now I just am in a phase the last couple of years of always trying to get my ego out of the copy.
What do you mean by that?
It's not about me.
It's never been about you, Joe.
Well, because it's what's of use, what's of interest. And some days, you know, I really like my reports a lot. I do 15 or 16 a day. I really like them a lot 2 days a week. They're okay a couple days a week, and 1 day a week I just didn't
So you're hard on yourself. All right, I see you on Twitter.
Yeah.
So you've come into the new age.
Right.
Do you have an iPad, an iPhone?
I have an iPad. No, I don't have an iPhone because I still like the raised keys, but the next one will probably be an iPhone. You know, I have an iPad, but I need a laptop just for hard
Can you
work.
imagine going back to a manual typewriter?
Wow.
Can you? I mean,
No.
which is when I started,
know.
and with 8 carbon copies, and you'd whip it out of the typewriter. I
Right.
can't imagine. You do conferences. You do business conferences. Do you love those?
Yeah, because they're reporting, but it's easy. The people you're reporting on come to you, so you just stand there and ask questions. I like it a lot.
How long in the business? Add them up.
I was a junior in high school
Well,
in
we could start-
1967. 77, 87, 97, 07, 17.
Long time.
Yeah.
What do you still want to do?
I'm interested, we may start some video web chats on WCBS. So I'm interested in giving that a try. I want to start doing some talks to nonprofit groups to help to tell nonprofit groups how I would suggest they could go about getting their message out better with my experience as a press secretary and a reporter. And I just want to, I want to use the soapbox that I have on CBS to teach about business and to give people business ideas. Becoming a teacher, and I think that's what the media should be used for. I always try to include at least one positive element in every report, even when the news is bad. Because one of the things I like about covering about entrepreneurs is that they just see opportunities instinctively. I really believe that entrepreneurs are born, not made, and then like many of us, they spend a career honing the skills that they're born with. So, geez, I just like to use the media for some good. I mean, I'm not going to become an astronaut or anything at this age, and I'm going to keep doing this. So I just want to try to do something useful with it.
Leave us with something positive about business. You know, we're dealing with sequestration.
Right.
We've got a partial government shutdown. As you say, you always leave somebody with something positive. Give us something positive.
That entrepreneurs instinctively see opportunity. And we all can learn a little bit to frame things the way that they do. I'll give you a great example. It was one of the WCBS small business breakfasts in Stanford. The recession was at about its worst. We had 3 or 4 business owners on the panel. I opened it up for questions. Oh man, my clients are cutting back. They're doing this, they're doing that. All the news was bad. The panelists, the business owners on the panel, I noticed they all kind of started jumping in their seats, squirming in their seats. And they looked at me like, let me talk. I said, David, and all these business owners who now had mid-sized businesses said, this is an opportunity for you. They said, these clients of yours are cutting back. They have to have somebody do the work. You can do the work for them. You can add a new service to take some of the work that they are no longer able to do in-house or think that they can't do. And so that's what's good about business. Specifically, that's what's good about business people. Specifically about business is that people are coming back. I was with a group the other night, mid-sized business owners in New York. Almost all of them said that they're up about 20% over a year ago. They sense that there will be a 4 to 5 year expansion, but a lot of business owners are still not back to where they were.
Right. You've got to reinvent.
It's coming back, and when the financial crisis hit, as 2 of the smartest people I know, what's going to happen, and they both said the same thing. They said this is going to take 5 to 7 years for us to come out of this. And we have to wait for pent-up demand to come back, which has happened to the real estate market to a degree, but it's going to take a long time. The data flies around faster than ever, but psychology doesn't change, right? And it takes us emotions and cycles to go through before behavior and sales start to follow.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on because I know you don't do much television, but you just did it very well.
Thank you.
And I wish you such good tidings and everything that you plan to do.
I want to thank you for a couple of things. One is that you helped to give Connecticut its identity. You are coming to represent our state and to speak for our state, you. And I heard you at a nonprofit dinner a few years ago get up and give an extemporaneous speech that was the nicest, most sincere, extemporaneous talk that one of the best I've ever heard. And you simply got up at this nonprofit group's dinner, and I was in the back of the room, and you got up and you said, you know what, we're all just people. Somebody in our family may need the help of this organization, someone in your family, we're all just the same. And you said it much better than this, but you got up in front of about 1,000 people and you just spoke from the heart. And I'll never forget how you spoke that night, that we're all just people.
And we are. Joe, thanks so much, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
See you around.
Yeah.